skies opened and fire rained down from the heavens. I witnessed a new leader rise from the ashes, promising peace. But only death came. But there were those that knew these days were coming, speaking of prophecies and signs. Maybe that's why I'm still here, to warn you how the world really ends.
There were those that believed the world would end during the turn of the 19th century, and yet again, just a few years later, in the year 1910, with the appearance of Halley's Comet, that was publicized as a divine signal for the end of the world.
Every new generation comes to the text, reads it, and is convinced that it describes events that will take place in their own lifetime.
The market crash of 2008 was the worst since the Great Depression in terms of the foreclosures on people's homes, the collapse of banks, the bankruptcy of some major American corporations.
The world could be a pretty scary place in 2016.
The Second Amendment is so important. They're not going to take your guns away, folks. They're not going to take your guns away. Not going to.
And of course, the NRA was an early backer of the Trump campaign.
In 2016, the NRA spent $419 million on political campaigns and more than $30 million on Donald Trump alone.
There's no bigger fan of the Second Amendment than me, and there's no bigger fan of the NRA.
It also endorsed Trump earlier than it had endorsed any presidential contender ever.
I'm officially announcing the NRA's endorsement of Donald Trump for president.
The National Rifle Association. And will protect the right of all Americans to keep their families safe.
Hey, all you un-American bastards! If you don't like America, why don't you get out?
It's time to deliver a victory for the American people. We don't win anymore, but we are going to start winning again. Winning? And we will make America great again. God bless you and good night. I love you. To say, as a Republican, it is so nice to hear you cheering for what I just said. Thank you. Believe me, believe me.
I hate some of these people, but I'd never kill them. Try to impeach him, just try it. You will have a spasm of violence in this country like you've never seen.
The American dream is dead. Stop resisting.
The president's powers here are beyond question.
We have launched an economic boom, the likes of which we have never seen before. I did this despite a near-record number of rate increases and quantitative tightening by the Federal Reserve since I won the election.
The Fed is one of the last standing institutions in this town that's working really well, and that's because of their political independence.
Our economic policies have ushered in an unprecedented tide of prosperity. I am officially declaring a national emergency.
The president declaring a state of emergency, freeing up billions of dollars in federal aid.
We can't get the economy back to normal if we have an epidemic of lawsuits on the heels of the pandemic.
The $900 billion package provides hardworking taxpayers with only $600 each in relief payments. It wasn't their fault. It was China's fault.
Remember January 6th? Not too long ago, the most powerful government seat in the world was filled by the unwitting culmination of that trend. For 4 years, the United States was ruled by a man who repeatedly parroted fascist narratives, cozied up to white supremacist organizations, and used armed forces and a militarized police to quash anti-fascist protest movements. Over 700 people have been arrested and charged for the acts committed on the day of the riots, and several trials are ongoing to identify central figures and prosecute them. Groups like the Proud Boys, who were involved in the event and reached superstar status in 2020 after this infamous clip.
stand back and stand by, but I'll tell you what, somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left.
The far right seems like it's continuing to grow in power and in influence under the Biden admin. Fascism has been on the rise for a while.
And they think they're getting our guns. I'm just telling them, 1776 is going to kick off again.
Fascism in this country has existed in some way for decades, if not centuries. The economic insecurity that has fallen on more and more shoulders, and the increasing pace of economic crises have resulted in a particularly unstable system that fewer and fewer people have faith in.
This bill represents a historic victory for the American people.
The motion House Speaker Nancy Pelosi celebrating as she gavelled in the final vote.
National debt just hit a huge milestone, passing $30 trillion for the first time ever. Since the end of 2019, the national debt has surged by about $7 trillion.
We saw debt rise dramatically in the late 2000s after the global financial crisis, and we saw debt rise again during COVID.
The problem is that we keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing day in and day out. So we're not borrowing for emergencies, we're not borrowing for only for long-term investments, we're borrowing for immediate consumption.
The Federal Reserve has been increasing interest rates since March 2022 with the goal of slowing down economic activity.
When you raise interest rates, you have to pay more to service the debt. You can't do the national programs we need to do without incurring even more debt.
The federal government paid $475 billion in interest on the national debt in 2022.
We're the wealthiest nation on earth, and we're basically taking resources that we don't have today and borrowing from the future.
Vote whatever way is the best way for you, because he cannot stop you.
And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
And President Xi of China, Kim Jong-un of North Korea, Putin, they don't respect him, they don't fear him, and he's going to drive us into World War III. The whole country is exploding because of you, because they don't respect you.
Hostile forces inside the United States grow strong. The United States is ravaged by crime and immorality. To protect and defend its citizens, the United States police force is formed. After the devastation, the Constitution is amended, and the newly elected president accepts a lifetime term of office.
My fear, if I may, for your approval.
The president's first act as permanent commander-in-chief is Directive 17, the deportation point for all people found undesirable or unfit to live in the new moral America.
Good, I wanted that to be a nice signature.
Once an American loses his or her citizenship, they are deported and they never come back.
This is the President of the United States. I now demand an immediate retreat of all forces now threatening this great nation. If my demand is not met immediately, I will destroy your ability to function permanently. Bring the aiming coordinates for Mexico online. I now render this final solution. Do it! Do it!
The United States is the smoking nation. Smoking, drinking, drugs, women. Guns, foul language, red meat. Land of the free.
We cannot afford to be so politically correct anymore.